This
so let's
conference
call
will
to
now be
order
recorded.
Sorry, this is
July meeting of the Environmental Advisory Council. First order of business is the minutes from the May meeting. Since we did not have a June meeting, so I make a motion to accept the May meeting minutes. Anybody want to second that or object to it? Or okay, I'll second it. So
accept.
okay, Chris.
Yep.
For the next, when Chris, Sarah, and I talked, we wanted to focus the meeting on agenda items 3 and 4, thinking there'd be some need for some significant conversation around both of those topics. So we deliberately limited the agenda to just those 2 items for tonight. So first one is the zoning updates, and there's 2 overlays that we want to discuss. One is the Jordan Valley overlay, which we brought up in previous meetings, and then the other one is this new PERT, Planned Innovation Research and Technology overlay, and there's an ordinance draft to adopt that as well. So Chris, I'll turn it over to you. Let's start with the Jordan Valley overlay district.
Sure. So a couple months ago, I think we presented a little bit on the idea of this Jordan Valley optional overlay zoning district for the northern tier of the township. When we did the comprehensive plan as part of the land use plan, we identified here in green in an area, typically what would be called our rural area, rural character area. We called it the Jordan Valley because of the Jordan Creek running through it, and because we found that it had a lot of distinct characteristics. We recommended a couple of different place types within that Jordan Valley, including the idea of preserving the open space as a main, the most highest functioning producing ag area. We have kind of your rural farmsteads, and that also ties into some of the historic areas where you have these farmstead homesteads, and then this idea, this concept of conservation subdivision, which is a tool of trying to put together more development in compact area to preserve what's around it, instead of these larger lot subdivisions where you can kind of eat up an entire parcel with homes. This is making a more compact development. When we ran through some of this in throughout the past year, we've been working with our consulting team on this. We had 3 land use types, or 3 development types, I should say, that we were proposing for this optional overlay. One being your village residential, so it's that compact development, but it's more in a village style, centered around a usable public open space and having open space surrounding it. And then and just kind of examples here of kind of the smaller lots and things like that. Then we had the village mixed use, or what we're calling the Crossroads Village. So this is kind of paying homage to the historic crossroads, Mechanicsville, Gooseville, that sort of thing, where you traditionally had your everything you need in that area as far as a commercial need, your post office, the butcher, and so forth, all where 2 roads came together. So this was something added because you can kind of have more of a commercial aspect in an appropriate setting, again focused around open space, both internal to the development and protecting that external open space in the view sheds. To address and accommodate for the almost 1,000 acres of existing industrial zoning in the northeast part of the township, up where Marie likes to remind me where she lives. We had included this idea of planned industrial, which was kind of our take on the conservation subdivision for industrial uses. So focused more of a campus style industrial development, a lot more compact trails and so forth running in between for employees, and then having that buffered from the outside. Buffering for just the need for buffering for industrial uses, but also preserving some of that view shed. What we ran into was it's very challenging to create an ordinance and having all of the requirements for that ordinance that are appropriate for, bless you,
Thank you.
appropriate for mixed use and residential use, also be appropriate for industrial use. And the other piece of this is because they're optional overlays, you have to have some good incentives in there for people to want to take advantage of them, because we're not changing anything to the base zoning. So it has to be something that is attractive for the developer to say, oh, I'm getting something out of this, therefore I will go through the process of additional requirements. Planned industrial became tough for that. So we, over the past 2 months or so, we pulled that out, and now we're looking at a separate standalone industrial overlay ordinance. We're calling it the PIRT, Planned Innovation, Research, and Technology. We've seen these in other places throughout the country. The idea behind the sort of the PIRT district is a tech-centered campus-style district. Again, the same sort of clustering, but with the hope that it encourages, for lack of a better word, some cleaner industrial uses. And it can actually, one of those incentives then could be some uses that could be allowed within there that are not already allowed in the industrial zone. So things that are more office related or educational related, so that you can have those tied in for kind of a tech campus where you have a mixture of these different types of uses that wouldn't typically be there. That planning in itself helps us. We have, because of this being an optional overlay, we're able to require some design guidelines. So we have an architect working with us, and that's in your packet, to encourage what these types of campuses could look like and encourage more of a tech feel. The other big piece of the PERT is, for probably the greater part of the year, as one of the uses that we were looking at with the planned industrial is data centers, being that these are very low truck use. The intensity of what's happening there as far as trucks in and out, it's not warehousing, it's not even storage or anything like that. Through the comp plan, that was one of the biggest things we heard, of trying to limit the amount of truck use on especially the 2 state roads going in to the industrial area, Cedar Crest Boulevard. We've already looked at, any developments on Cedar Crest Boulevard could drastically change that, and Mock Chunk Road.
Yeah.
So as we were kind of looking into data centers as an option, there's also been a tremendous push for data centers in Pennsylvania. If you've paid attention to what's happening with the governor's office, there's a lot of investment into data center development. There's been a couple projects that were announced that I don't know if they're moving to fruition or not, but in Bucks County and in Luzerne County. So we're a little behind. Personally, I feel a little exposed, because right now what happens in the zoning ordinance, a development like a data center is not something that's currently defined in our zoning ordinance. And when you have something that's not defined and it's of interest from developers, typically what happens is then the developer wants to come in and put something in there. They're usually going to put it in the most appropriate district, the district that has the most uses, industrial. They're not going to bring it in an RR2 district or something like that. So targeting that uses that aren't in the zoning ordinance will most likely fall to the industrial zone. It makes sense to try to address this in our industrial zone planning. The other piece of it is that if we don't have criteria for it, usually what happens is a developer who has done these types of developments before, they say, here's the criteria that we used in this township or in this area. So we're a little behind in that and feeling exposed in addressing the data center popularity and the possibility and frankly likelihood of a data center coming here. And it also is something that has some benefits to the idea of this PERT district as well. and I think we can build off of the two. So
Can I hit you with a question?
yeah,
If you don't mind, I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm hearing negative things about data centers
Mm-hmm.
in a big way,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know the inside, just, various reading about the water use, the electrical use and the overload that no one foresaw.
Noise is another one.
Noise is a very big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear the same thing.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so
this
you're
is-
talking about data centers as all be all end all. I'm like, wait a second.
No, and that's where it's, what would have been nice is we started to look into it and we thought, okay, well, it addresses some of the needs that we have.
Sure, absolutely.
But there's also, there's a trade-off. There's a lot of big impacts, very big impacts. Impacts that, frankly, we don't have the base zoning protections for, if that makes sense. So noise is a great example. Noise right now in the township's noise ordinance, there's not much in there that it's doesn't easily combat something like a data center. So what we've done in the preparation of the PERT district is try to specifically address noise based on research and information that we've been gathering from data centers, so that we can find ways to try to mitigate the impacts
Okay.
of that type of noise. And water usage is another big one we've heard. Trying to think of energy. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
They suck up energy.
Well, then there's the issue, are they gonna pull from the grid, or are they gonna generate electricity on site?
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, and so it's an area where, being the industrial zone, there's a lot that can go there, but there's also, is that something that becomes just powering for one particular use? Does that become, additional power for that area? So,
But if they want to put in half a dozen big gas turbines and run natural gas to generate electricity, that's a different footprint than pulling electricity off the grid, right? So,
yeah,
or a solar field, right?
yeah.
Some solar farm, yeah.
So the only thing that we've really done existing in the ordinance related to that is allow for accessory uses like that. We talked a little bit, the geothermal energy, solar and everything, that if there is the ability to have something on site to power that, it would be allowed in the PERT. So at this point, we have drafted an ordinance, and that starts on page.
Chris, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Maybe a higher level question. What's unique about the PERT being suitable for industrial uses that isn't true of the rest of the Jordan Valley overlay? What are the characteristics of the PERT that make that particularly suitable for industrial?
I would say none. It just is industrial. That's kind of where we're at. We looked at it before when we were doing the official map, and there's certainly areas there that we'd love to preserve as much farmland as we possibly could. But we have an existing industrial zone. So I think early on in the comp plan, we talked about trying to limit that industrial zone, but that's where you're changing a use of, you're changing essentially the marketability of a property, potentially the value of a property. It exposes us to challenges there.
Because this is all optional, right?
It's all optional.
So
yeah.
if somebody wanted to put a data center somewhere else in the township.
No, so that's the other thing that this ordinance does is, so we have the PERT piece of it, which lays out the criteria for the Okay. I'm hardwired in. I don't know if you have.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're good now. So, yeah. All right. Sorry about that. As I was saying, page 13, I break down the different sections of the ordinance. And the first section is updating the use schedules of the zoning ordinance. So what this does is this actually creates data center as a use in our zoning ordinance, and that's recognized throughout the entire thing then. What it allows is data centers as defined to be allowed in the industrial zone, the existing base industrial zone, only under a conditional use hearing. Conditional use is when you have something that is very unique and you have to, if you want to put that in there, you have to go through a public hearing process with the Board of Commissioners and meet several criteria and questions on that. This essentially closes that gap of us not having it defined and not having a place for it. So it gives it a definition, it gives it a place, and it gives it a process. Conditional use is not everyone's favorite. It's definitely a gamble.
So if you want to put a data center in the PERT, you don't need the conditional use hearing.
Correct.
If you want to put it elsewhere, you do need the hearing.
No, you can still only put it in the industrial
Oh,
zone.
and it has to be zoned properly.
Yes,
but-
the difference is the data centers that we're permitting in there are much smaller, 150,000 square feet, 40 feet high.
But if you wanted to put a data center elsewhere in the township
You can't do it.
that's zoned industrial, you could do it, but you'd have to do the conditional use hearing.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry, okay.
And if you didn't go through the PERT, you could only go up to 150,000 square feet, which, trying to think of an example. So our smallest warehouse, I think, in the township is around that. It's maybe even smaller. So the viability of it, it's there if you really want to do it. But I think the way the direction is going is bigger. So you can do a bigger, probably more marketable data center,
500,000 square feet.
500,000 and up to 50 feet high. That's still only in the industrial zone, but that would be under the approval of the PERT.
Yeah.
So then that's where all of the PERT requirements kick in. So because it's an option, the developer has to agree to that option. They sign that as part of the land development application, and then that's where everything in the ordinance, pretty much starting on page 20.
I see. Am I looking at the wrong thing? I see.
26.
Okay, what's the ordinance on page 15?
Page 15.
Yeah, what-
Oh, yes, that is that's the start of the adopting ordinance.
Okay,
But if we kind of run through, that's where all of these different sections, you have your kind of standard legalities, all the whereas clauses. And then that's where you have the section 1, which defines data center, and it defines all of the stuff associated with, because data centers have a lot of equipment. It also defines noise, because we wanted to have it specific for the noise requirements.
And I thought the design standards were pretty comprehensive in terms of, buffer zones and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the ordinance, the adopting ordinance will have all of that. It'll specify, here's what the data center is. It goes into the industrial zone under conditional use. Again, there's 150,000 square foot, 40 foot high, setbacks from roads and so forth. And then the buffering is good, but it's not the top of the line where we're kind of pushing what we can really require as much as it is in the PERT option.
So if I wanted to put a data center in the PERT, but I don't want to follow all these guidelines, am I still allowed to do that? Because it's still optional, isn't it? Or
You can only put it under these, it's one of two guidelines, either the conditional use guidelines, which are specific, but there's also a lot of subjectivity to, because you have that public use hearing, or the PERT, which our intent was to make it as almost prescriptive as possible so that it's very clear. One thing that we've learned through all of the developments, Ridge Farms was a good example of that, and some of the things that we're finding now with different developments where we've developed these good plans, the landscapes plan and so forth, and we're trying to request things. If it's not specifically codified, and we've talked about this, then it becomes, even if someone's willing to do it, it just becomes messy in how it gets done. So one of the intents of the PERT is to be as specific as possible, to lay out what we hope it'll look like. And to have that up front so someone sees it and they plan for it. They say, okay, I understand I want to put a data center into this location. I understand I can get a bigger, better data center going through this PERT. What do I need to do? I need to put in these buffers, then they can decide before they even come in. So in some cases, it could be a bit of a deterrent, but I think in the most, it'll be getting at least the expectation of what's going to be there up front.
Right. Yeah, quick comment in regard to that. There was a warehouse, and I can't tell you exactly where, over in Northampton County, that was put in. And I know the folks at Edge of the Woods had to do some type of, I'm not gonna call it landscaping, they had to do something because of the water. Okay, because of runoff, this type of thing, so riparian, okay, and they chose a location for the riparian. It was very interesting to hear from them, meaning Edge of the Woods, when they approached the warehouse people and said, okay, this is what we want to do. And they say, well, guys, like, how much is it going to cost? Well, this is how much it's going to cost. And it was not cheap. The guy was like, go, do it, just do it. So it's very interesting if they have the money and they really wanted, she was somewhat shocked.
Yeah.
His answer was just like that, just do it.
It's cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And that's the other really big advantage of having this stuff as specific as we can for them to start to price out and say, this isn't, it's not unattainable. But I think, so when we started the Jordan Valley planning for this, for the zoning update, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement, and we met with a lot of developers to talk about things like, so if we're going this direction, is there a market for this? Yeah. What are some of the things that if we put in these sort of requirements, would you be open to that, or would you not be open to that? We learned a lot about how far we can push things, that it's just going to push people away, and then we're stuck with an optional ordinance that no one is interested in. So the biggest thing that we learned is it's really just that time. It's the time in, if they know up front and they can plan for it up front, it's on them to consider whether they want to do it or not. If they get into this and they start running through all of it, and there's too many questions and they're wasting time, then that becomes something that they're just not interested in. They either pull the project or they cut corners.
Right, so being this specific, you're answering the questions.
Exactly.
You're
With hopefully the intent of what we've gathered through the land use planning, landscapes plan, all of that. And that's kind of the other piece of this. I added, it was so helpful, like Frank mentioned, talked with him and Sarah the other week to set the agenda, and Sarah brought up, as she's been bringing up, the lighting. And we've talked about, certainly, Tom and I and folks in community development, updating our lighting ordinance, or the lighting sections of our zoning ordinance. That's not going to happen quickly. So I've added in some lighting standards here, but that was a great piece of input. And here's something that we can do to establish what we've been hearing, and see if it sticks, see if that works. So I've added that in there.
Yep.
Essentially, yeah.
One thing I noticed that on page 13 is a community environmental impact statement is required. Is there a template for that? Or, I mean, because that would certainly be something I would think this group would want to look at. I didn't see anything in the ordinance itself that defines what needs to be included there, or, what that report needs to look like. So
Yeah,
is it understood what that needs to be, or is it?
there's something in there. We'll go to it.
Did you,
So
did you say it was on page 13?
Yeah, it's the fifth bullet.
I'm sorry.
The fifth bullet on page 13. The community environmental impact statement is required.
I did include something for, let's see, on page 20, where it's the, even if it's going to be
Yeah, I saw
just the
this, so
conditional
it's-
use or the PERT, they'll still need to do that community environmental impact. And essentially that's so there's very specific or there's environmental impact assessments, which in the federal government, there is very specific criteria for that. That's much more extensive and specific to like utility uses and things like that. So the idea here is we usually get, as part of an application, we get a project narrative. Like a project narrative from a project we looked at earlier, and essentially all that's required in the project narrative is tell us what you're doing. Most of the time they'll say it's this square footage, here's what it is, and it's a paragraph.
Yeah.
So the thought here was, as part of that project narrative, give us that impact statement. Is there going to be impacts that you know of on some of these items?
Okay.
We talked about water supply, groundwater supply. This is also the opportunity for the developer to potentially address some of those initial concerns or talk about the mitigation strategies that they're prepared to do. So yeah, I think Marie, the example you gave of working with that
From Tim Driscoll in Friday morning.
I'm sorry, the example I gave.
The warehouse
Yeah.
development working with Edgewood Woods. So that's an opportunity for them to say it up front instead of down the line, to say, look, we understand we're going to impact this area of something, but to mitigate that, we're going to do 3 times the amount of habitat improvements over here. Put that up front. Then that runs through the EAC, that runs through the Planning Commission, and we can comment on that more specifically.
So do you see this as being a feedback loop where we get a
Yes.
incomplete or inadequate environmental impact statement? We can go back and say, this doesn't meet the requirements and you need to.
This is the first thing that I would bring to this board to say,
All right.
here's the application, here's their environmental impact statement, what are your thoughts? So that you can get those comments up front to them. Sometimes what happens is, I've seen it, the developer is more than willing to do something. They don't know it's necessarily an issue until 3 meetings in with the board, and then finally the issue comes up, and then they say, oh, if you would have just asked us at the beginning, we would have definitely done that. We never even thought of it. And so this will be a little bit of that give and take of, hey, I see you're addressing, air quality, but what are you going to do about, what's your water usage? What's your water consumption, and what's the water table like in that area?
Because I could see in some cases you might get a very perfunctory response to something like this that doesn't really answer the questions. And so I can see where you want to have the ability to go back and say, no, this isn't good enough.
Yes.
We need more information, or so.
And at the very least, now it's in here as a requirement, and that gives you guys something to feed off of instead of just a general question. Because I think we struggle with that now of, we'll be looking at Saldo updates, talks more specifically about, site specific things, but this is that subjective, how do we comment on environmental concerns and have that in a, I don't want to say controlled way, but a more focused dialogue. Because I think sometimes we'll hear things, that, oh, what about this animal here? And there's usually there's no foundation in that.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, it definitely wastes the developer's time, and sometimes it wastes a board like our time if it's, well, you want to be sensitive to community response to that, but you also wanted to say, look, there's not habitat for that here, or.
If someone uses this overlay, is it still the zoning board that would make a final recommendation to the board of commissioners?
No, so if they go through the PERT, it goes in just like a normal land development.
Okay.
It's just they're checking off that they will follow any requirements in here that are, requirements in here would trump anything in Saldo if it's specific to that.
Mhm.
So a good example is we have the requirement for, under all the site design standards. One of the first things in here you'll see is the idea of this pedestrian zone.
Yeah.
So this sort of fits in with the idea that we have under Saldo blanket requirements for curbing, sidewalks, street trees. Not every development in the township is really appropriate for curbing, sidewalks, street trees in the sense that it would be in a neighborhood as it is in the northern part of the township. So the thought of the pedestrian zone was a more appropriate pedestrian-oriented requirement that gives specifics, and then this would relieve the developer of following those specific Saldo requirements, because they're doing something that is honestly, I think, more appropriate in an upgrade.
Yeah.
This is more in line with kind of what we're running through right now with the Jordan Creek Greenway. We have a land development in for Parkland High School. They have to do sidewalks, but we already have the trail designed through there, so let's try to do something like that. Some of the other design pieces, again, the buffering. The buffering is more specific, and this is what we're seeing here is only the buffering for the non-data center developments within the PERT. So we specified those two because the data center projects would have a much larger setback because of sound and so forth. But things like an R&D facility or a STEM school with an office, we're hoping that they're more compact, so you don't need as many setbacks. But they'll still have these buffer requirements, and even these buffer requirements are a little bit more detailed and a step up from what we have under base zoning. Base zoning, I think it just says you need a 30-foot buffer between two uses that are not the same. So this provides a little bit more context so the developer can see, okay, this is what they're looking for. They put on their landscape plan, gets reviewed by the Shade Tree Commission, and the Shade Tree Commission knows what they're looking for as well. Facades, basically just looking at what's visible from the road, the side of the building, trying to get away from big blank boxes. If we can add a little bit more architecture, we want to see that. A lot of screening of all of the mechanical equipment and so forth, because again, we're talking about some sites that are there that are, I don't know if anyone has been back to the Geo facility, but it's a gigantic chemical manufacturing facility that no one sees from the public road.
Right.
So that's kind of the benefit that we have in our industrial zone, and we want to keep that for any new developments. I want to run through a little bit of some of the design standards, but what I'll do is it's easier to kind of show you them. So at the end of the ordinance, I've included the design guidelines. So these are meant to be a visual complement to the ordinance itself, to essentially give someone the idea of what the text requirements are saying. So there's a lot of pictures and examples of just trying to, again, break up facades. We talk a little bit about sort of the orienting more campus-like development. Here's a good example of the roof, instead of just having a box, adding a little bit more architecture and so forth.
And you can see that, Chris, what you and I talked about earlier today, that the
Yes.
glass, you see the reflections?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Marie brought up earlier about birds,
Bird safe.
bird safety, and so one of the things I'm wrestling with is where that goes, how easily that can be codified in the ordinance, because it is more of a structured design. And I think that's something that when we get a project in, and once we have more details, that if we're seeing something that's like this, that's a very appropriate comment in that environmental impact statement. What are your plans for, can we see architecturals? What are your plans for bird safety? Because you're talking about a big open area now and you're putting in a lot of glass. And I think that's where you can recommend just those treatments.
Right. I would highly recommend that, yep.
Here's kind of an example, again, of that sort of compact development. You have the sort of internal usage and the trails around it. You have the big buffer zones. The other thing we're trying to do is preserve some of the view sheds from the outside from the roads, because we have, keeping those views from as you're going into the rural areas of the northern part of the township and into North Whitehall.
How do you define parking requirements for these? It's going to vary pretty significantly depending on the use, right?
Exactly. So the anything that is not a data center is already a defined use, and so those have specific parking requirements already.
Right.
And then the data center parking requirements, they're really tough. We're looking at what's needed because the truck usage is much lower. Typically, of an industrial development this size, we started out with a lot of truck parking, and then looking into what's needed, they're not getting deliveries, they're not getting truck parking. The other thing that's important here is these are very secure facilities, so everything needs to be cut off.
Yeah.
So parking can kind of be handled internally, and it's not something that can be like, you're not going to have a lot of like satellite parking areas or anything like that. But it depends on if it's a positive or a negative. I don't think that there's a huge boost in employment with data centers, because I don't think they require a lot of employees. So in areas that are looking for adding more jobs, it's not something great there. But for areas that are looking to reduce commuter travel, it's kind of nice. So that's the other consideration. And I think I put in something about parking is more dependent on the number of employees.
Something.
Yeah, there's a lot in here, and I apologize, I don't have it all. But I think that's where we had it. Maybe in the use itself. On page, yes, page 17. So the office and security buildings would be one space per 300 square foot area.
Okay.
And then for the operations themselves, one space per employee. So if they have a larger facility and they're having a lot of employees, obviously we want more parking, but we don't want to do that if they have a large facility but they only need 3 people working there. The storage and loading area was one that we decreased. We had that much higher based off of our other industrial uses, but it just didn't make sense. And then we felt like that was a lot of wasted space for truck use that wouldn't be there. That's another component of this, the page that I'm on, the site design and screening, having all of that stuff not visible, so that it would be sort of cut off from not looking at loading docks and that sort of thing, all being buffered, so that we're seeing more of this from the outside, and what's behind those trees, hopefully we can't see. That goes the same for all of the mechanical equipment, and we talked about just the extensive amount of equipment that's needed. We want to try to buffer that visually as much as we can, but it also helps with some of the sound dampening. There's a lot of good technology out there. We have some specifics as far as fencing. knowing that security fencing is needed. And then, yeah, the pedestrian zone, I really, really like the pedestrian zone and this idea of having an appropriate walkway. So you can see good examples of that. And then the buffer zone. So this particular buffer zone is for non-data center. And this is just a cross section to help visualize it. So these would be non-data center buildings. So if this were to be like an R&D facility or something like that, you have your public road. Every development is going to require that pedestrian zone, which has the 10-foot wide trail, street trees as both the safety buffer, but also kind of a visual buffer, obviously to provide shade, and then some sort of buffering or screening between what the pedestrians are seeing and the building itself. Now, internally, it'll be more of that campus style development, but this way you're not looking at the buildings.
Chris?
Yeah.
Real quick question here before, I don't know if it's a quick answer, but we're talking a lot about the data centers. But you've also talked about, possible schools, possible campuses, as far as STEM or the community colleges or this type of thing. Will they, how can I put this? Have you talked to any of the higher education people? In other words, what their needs would be
No. So
in this type of a
it's a good
district?
question. No, we haven't. I'll be honest. I think the challenge is we have those uses defined, so it's just a matter of putting those uses in. We are thinking about if we want to update our zoning ordinance anyway, that would be the time to kind of reorient what those uses are and any specific requirements there. Like to Mark's question, or I forget, maybe it was Frank's question on the parking. Parking is defined by the use. So if it becomes something that we have a use that probably needs to be modernized for like a STEM facility and things like that, if it's, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what they might need that isn't included there already.
Right.
But
Just curious.
that would be more in the overall zoning change. We spent a lot of time trying to address the unknowns of the data center with this one. And we're hoping to, the only change we made to existing uses was flex building.
That's cool too.
Yeah, because flex building just had a weird, it had a weird definition that could be interpreted several ways. So we just made that a little bit more clear, to not open ourselves up to something that we didn't want. But I also feel like the way we're not getting a ton of interest on community colleges reaching out to us to expand their facilities right now. This is more if we get something on the technology side, on the data center side, how do we build off of that in an appropriate way so that we're not just stuck with, okay, well now the data center's here, data center. It could be, all right, here's a data center. Can we encourage something built off of that would maybe draw the attention of different types of developments?
Well, it's kind of like what you said, it's so close to Parkland, to the
Yeah.
high school, and they're always innovating, they're always, expanding on what they offer. So I find it interesting that the two would be close and opportunity perhaps.
Yeah, we haven't specifically talked to Parkland about this so much, but I think it'll be something that the other need here, I think, with related to Parkland and maybe even the higher education is, it's not in here, but we'll probably address it more in the Jordan Valley, is kind of the same sort of campus type of need for schools. Right now, there's a lot of school use. It's kind of like there's the school use and that's it. But schools have other needs as well, and those things get a little disjointed. So if we can kind of make it a little easier for what would be either a school and having a space for higher education and having a space for like career training, but maybe also like a work program, all within the same type of campus, that would probably address some of the needs that we're at least seeing from the school district on the outside.
No, it makes sense, it makes sense.
As we get into it more, we have sort of the just sketches and ideas for design, just to again break up the monotony, try to encourage something more interesting. We talk a lot about different zones within the buffering, and we tried to use this to talk about more naturalized landscaping and so forth. Stormwater management was one that we wrestled back and forth with of how much can we require, but then we also have our own stormwater ordinance. These facilities can also have very unique needs. I think we're going to try to dig more into this with the Jordan Valley stuff, where we can understand, at least as staff, we understand residential stormwater needs much more than heavy industrial stormwater needs. But one thing I like is this idea of you have the pedestrian zone, then you'll have this transition zone, which is a great way to utilize the managed natural areas.
Well, what is the stormwater concerns, Chris, depending on the size of the building, they're quite large. Would they be similar or the same of what you would be requiring of warehouses?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
in other words,
exactly,
you already have something in place there, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because of runoff and
Yes.
coming off of these buildings and whatever.
But it doesn't incentivize, or even if it encourages, it doesn't push someone to more natural stormwater management.
Gotcha.
It's a lot more engineered.
Gotcha, okay.
But that's something that we'd love to explore more. And I think we have an opportunity to in the Jordan Valley, because we can use that more as an incentive to help count that towards some of their open space.
Yep.
So yeah, here's an example of kind of the buffering. So again, you have the public road, the pedestrian zone, this transition zone of more that natural, and this could be where you have stormwater management with some natural landscaping around it. And then we have the idea of this very heavily screened, buffered area of creating berms. We get very specific to the types of plantings that should be there, having your evergreen rows up on top to provide that initial visual screening year round, having some canopy trees and some shrubs and things like that, and some ornamental trees to help just with the aesthetic of it, so that it doesn't look like it's just a green wall throughout the whole thing. The other piece that, and I was mentioning to the Shade Tree Commission, because we have a lot of natural vegetation there, if you drive along the road, there are sections that you're right up against, especially like Parkland High School. There's a section there, there's lots of big trees. So why should we cut down big trees to have some plant trees? Right. So part of that would be, it's specific to have that reviewed with the Shade Tree Commission for them to assess. Yes, you have large trees, but they're all dying and they'll probably be down in a few years, or this is a good healthy road. You want to make sure you keep this and build off of that. So
I think that's great, because that's really been neglected for many years. You know, the trees, large trees that were already on properties.
Yeah. It's hard to account for. So we've looked at this as an opportunity to put them in. But again, you can see that 350-foot setback gives you plenty of space to allow for a lot of this buffering and hopefully, shield. This is kind of your line of sight to what you'd see. And even there, you still have the facade requirements of, if you're going to do a data center, the idea of maybe a decorative parapet, or you'd still have to break up the top of the wall. If you have equipment up on top, HVAC equipment, having that shielded, and having that shielded more with either natural colored wall, maybe a sound wall, or even something a little bit more architecturally interesting.
Is there anything in the ordinance to these setbacks and such to encourage them to be less manicured?
Yeah. So the Yeah, that definitely
What do you mean by that?
the
Well, I
transition
mean,
zone.
vast expanses of grass that has to be mowed.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's this
Yeah.
whole transition zone. So the transition zone is that what we ran into was on the actual buffering, what we're calling the buffer zone, which is intended to visually shield the building.
Right, yeah.
We needed to be specific, and we wanted to encourage plantings, or again,
Yeah,
if you have it, through existing plantings. So that might look a little bit more manicured, as far as you'll probably see kind of spacing just in the way that they'll do it on a berm. But this transition zone between where pedestrians would stand and the start of that required plantings and the berms, this is all supposed to be naturalized.
But
So
then you
whether-
have, you still have a pretty wide setback to the building within the fence.
Yes.
Right? So,
we felt like if we don't see it and let them figure out their needs there, because I don't know as far as, so for example, the security fence here is shown all the way back here. We ran into, well, do we require where the fence should be? Do we not? Because it's, at that point, it's kind of a secure facility, and we wanted to mostly encourage, we don't want to see it, we don't want to hear it, whatever is on the inside, we care a little less about. I certainly can see from an environmental perspective, we'd love to not have just grass there. That can certainly be a comment. If a project.
yeah, it's a way to just encourage that, right? And
Yeah.
not necessarily require it, but is there, something we could offer that would encourage people to consider something other than large expanses of lawn grass?
Yeah, I would say start with a comment on it as part of the community environmental impact, and say, you're taking, if it is this big, you're gonna have to have 350 feet. Say the berm and everything is only in this way. If you have 100 feet that is not required plantings, the EAC is encouraging you to do something that can provide for habitat, something that can provide for reduction of a heat island from the building, and point out stuff like that. As far as a requirement,
they could pave all that, right? I mean, based on the way
They
it's
could.
written, right?
they could, and that's
They'd have to have an enormous space in though, or something.
Right,
yeah.
Still,
Yeah, they absolutely. Well, it's the setback, so they could pave it if they need it, but they can't have a building there. They have impervious surface requirements. They're pretty big in the industrial zone, 75%. But again, that's if you have a 50 acre. The funny thing is, though, if you sort of draw out the buffering requirements, the setback requirements, it's a pretty small footprint to what can actually be put into some of these with the development. So it's like,
Relatively speaking.
well, yeah, relatively speaking. I guess when you're talking about your percentages of a site. So if you have
Right.
a site and you still have to accommodate 350 feet from a public road, you're automatically taking out a big piece of that. And we felt like that adding more into what's behind the berm, there's benefits to it, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
want to create
requirement,
something.
I mean, just is
Yeah.
there a way to just encourage people to think about doing something?
Yeah, I really like that in the initial, community environmental impact, and you can even say that because it doesn't really matter so much as to their specific site design. It's not something that's down the line once they're 80% designed, and you say, oh, how about this? Because you have a big setback. So if you see, even from a sketch plan, if it's, a 50-acre property and they're putting in a big data center here and you have your areas around it, then you could say, we know this area and this area are going to be 200 feet of lawn. We encourage you to do something to benefit habitat through there, especially because of the loss. That's pretty much all of it as far as the what's in there as far as what's in the PERT. The big things are community environmental impact statements, the noise requirements. We have specific objective noise requirements at the property lines they have to meet. And in order to plan for that, we have we're requiring a pre-construction noise study that they would model the noise based on what they anticipate there, so that we can see that and we can start to talk about mitigating concerns and
Also continuous monitoring.
yes, continuous monitoring at the site. Because that's kind of the thing, these, you can model the best that you want, but if the thing goes in, and then we would need to know if it's going over that required level at the property line. That, and then the
Continuous monitoring and require them to issue reports to the township?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a periodic request, at the request of the township, right, Chris? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so we wrestled with this because we didn't really know. It's all new. It's all new to us. And so I'm researching monitoring equipment and so forth. So we left it as they need to prepare a monitoring plan prior to occupancy, or what we call our zoning certificate of use. And so that we have that, or actually it might even be before the land development approval.
Yeah, but the intent is like if a township official gets a complaint,
Yeah.
then we should be able to go and request that information at any time.
Yeah, so there should be some kind of data retention requirement.
Mm-hmm. The thought was we would work out the specific details as part of the condition of their land development approval, so that we can get an idea of what kind of monitoring equipment is used. Where are you putting that? Do we have direct access to that, or are you giving us, monthly reports of that or something? It felt like a little too much to put into the requirements.
That makes sense, yeah.
And then I'm looking for the lighting end of it.
That could be another thing that this board could comment on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and the planning commission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I forget where I added the lighting section.
At the end.
Do you have a page number?
No, I do. I know you told me that and I found it. Because I was looking for it.
32.
Is it 32?
Yeah.
No, oh, here it is, data center lighting standards, yeah.
Yeah, so this was really, I want to get definitely Sarah's feedback, and I'll send her an email specifically, making a comment about just trying to manage the lighting a little bit. It's a balance, understanding that this is an industrial zone, and what we're talking about are new industrial facilities. So there's definitely going to be an impact to lighting. We looked at the Dark Skies Consortium, or whatever that organization is called now, and just some other examples of model ordinances. It pulled a couple things out of that, and yeah, so part of that is you have to be at the level for outdoor use in the Eliminating Engineering Society handbook. That's an easy one for us to check that. We already have a third-party lighting consultant that reviews land developments for consistency with our lighting section of the ordinance. So this would be the same, but this is a little bit higher standard. And then talking about fully shielded, and yeah, I definitely got to learn a little bit about lighting. 5% of their total lumen output above 80 degrees from nadir. So anyone doesn't know what that means?
I need to go to virtual.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. And so that is the idea of everything's pointed down. And then really, when we get a lighting plan, we're looking at the the spillage, the lighting spillage from these sites. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. We'll often get comments maybe from the Public Safety Commission for needing more lighting. But then we also would like less lighting in our ordinances. So what we looked at was having that light trespass go to the buffer zone, which is again that big bermed one. So we want to control it there with the thought that no matter how the property is oriented, you're going to have this buffer zone around it. You might have different uses, whether it's industrial or residential or going to a public street. But as long as you're keeping the lighting within that buffer zone at a very low level, hopefully it wouldn't spill out over into anything else. I don't know if anyone else has any other comments on the lighting, if we think we need to step it up, but that's kind of the balance level that I found. I think we wanted, when we update the zoning ordinance and our sections of Saldo for the township, will be a lot more specific. One of the things that I really like, and I'm sure Sarah will get a kick out of this, is the idea of it's not blanket lighting standards. You have these transitional lighting zones. So it doesn't matter what the use is there. It's more what's the character of the area. So if you have Walbert Avenue is a great example. Walbert Avenue, you might have different residential uses, different commercial uses, and so forth. But you might have a higher lighting standard through that because of it being such a significant street, and if you have pedestrian access. And then it kind of softens as you go further into the neighborhoods. So even if it's the same zoning district or the same residential type of use, because of where it's located, it could change. Yeah. So on the PERT, the idea is we have everything in draft. We have to get this to Township Planning Commission. Their meeting is August 12th, I believe. August 14th, which is the second Thursday. We also need to get this to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission for their comments and review. They meet at the end of the month, so I need to get this to them ideally later this week. Once it goes to Township Planning Commission, Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, go back to the Board of Commissioners, and we'll talk about approval to start the advertising process. This is an update to the zoning ordinance, so all the properties surrounding that industrial zone will be posted. Mailers will go out to all the, you'll get.
I'll get a mailer.
Yeah, so, and then that'll be for notice of the public hearing. And then typically what we do is a public hearing, usually within the Board of Commissioners meeting. Sometimes we do it as a special meeting, we're not sure yet, so we're talking about that, I think, depending on the interest. If we think that there'll be a lot more interest that's bigger than this room, we can potentially look at other venues. So with all that, there's a lot to do, and that's where any comments or any adjustments before it gets to that advertised part, it adds another 2 months, 3 months, or so forth. So I know it's a fast turnaround, but unless, if there are there big things that you guys have concerns about or want to look at with this, and if not, if I can ask you to kind of go through and give me any
It looked
comments.
very comprehensive to me, so I was pretty happy with what I saw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been several months.
And I made my comments to you as well.
Yeah.
So you have those, you have Sarah's comments in regard to the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want us to vote on it?
I would love to go to our Board of Commissioners and even the Planning Commission and express support if you guys want to provide specific support. So if you want to vote to say that you recommend it for adoption,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Can we do that with just the three?
Yeah, it's technically a
Yeah, we have
quorum because we only have 5.
Oh, okay, so we're
So,
good.
yeah,
The other thing I might suggest is if there's any place where we could specifically highlight EAC review for the compute, for the
We can add that to right in the beginning of community environmental impact.
that and the noise control plan, the lighting control plan. If we
Yeah,
could
that's a
just
good idea.
put that in the ordinance, it says, EAC review of this would be part of the process, or something along those lines.
Yes,
Tell us the pages there, Chris. if
Yeah.
it's on,
so
So we know.
I'm looking at, first would be the page 19 and 20,
Okay.
which talks about the conditional use process in that hearing.
Okay, so there's noise there. Is that what we're
There's
saying?
noise there.
Mhm. Yeah, 1920.
So, okay. And I was going to say, I feel like I added something in related to that. If you look at on page 20, number 3, such uses shall require the submission of community environmental impact statement to be reviewed by township staff and any township boards, commissions,
Oh, there you
councils,
go.
or consultants deemed necessary.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do was make sure that it could be expressly called out, but also not avoid anyone, because I didn't know if, say, if we ever get to the point of establishing a historical commission to deal with the historic resources, and there could be historic resources affected. So for this one, again, this is just a conditional use piece of it. Are you okay with how that is written on page 20? But then we'll look at
Yeah,
more the
we
perk
just said
stuff.
the same thing on page 19 about the noise study. Right, it just says reviewed by township staff and any township consultants.
I'll add,
We also add the,
yeah, township staff.
township boards, commissions, councils.
Yep.
Yeah, I see. Number 2. That's where you want to add it in. Okay.
And then same for lighting, right? What are those?
Yeah, so lighting is not, I did not include lighting under the conditional use piece. But part of the nature of conditional use is it has that subjective review that I think it even says in one of the criteria questions, how will lighting and noise be affected? So that is an opportunity for the Board of Commissioners to say, we want to uphold the lighting standards. So the buffer zones for the part I made specific to the Shade Tree Commission only because of their technical, wonderful technical abilities. They're great.
Aren't they great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. So I think we want to add something in.
Be interesting to see what the LVPC sends back. Sometimes it's minimal comments.
I don't think it'll be minimal for this. I
You
do
don't?
have some
Oh,
concerns.
Dave? Oh, that's
Um,
interesting.
I have concerns because our industrial zone is not exactly in line with the regional plan.
Ah.
It's 500 acres of farmland right now,
Mm.
and that's how the regional plan shows it, farmland preservation.
Gotcha.
But we already have the industrial zone, so
Yeah.
I think if we want to be in compliance, then we would have to rezone it to agricultural or something like that. So Dave and I are prepared to go to those meetings and I don't like saying make that argument, but point out that fact that
Right.
what we're hoping to do with this is soften kind of a little bit of what we had, or at least encourage maybe more opportunity for protected farmland with some of these extensive buffers. But I think it'll be interesting. I'm not sure. We received some, Penn Future reached out. They've started to prepare some model ordinances for data centers, and they're kind of seeing municipalities going through the same thing where they're sort of caught behind all this. And so I don't know how much LVPC has done on it yet, but I definitely know that they probably will be reviewing a lot of these types of.
Yeah, be real interesting to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
You'll bring that back to us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that meeting, it's the, their comprehensive plan meeting
Mhm.
is on Tuesday, August 26th. So that's, I believe, at noon virtual.
Yeah,
So that's the one we'll tune into and specifically kind of talk and give a little bit of background on this.
okay, so that's noon on 8.
26.
That'll be the day after our next meeting.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So I'll include that date in the packet and make the announcement too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's where you and Dave are hoping to be present.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, to specifically talk
Yeah, I
through this,
know they
because
are.
then what they do is so staff provides their comments, and that's why you need to get it to them very quickly, so they have time to get their comments ahead of that meeting.
Yep.
Then they discuss it more with the comp plan group,
Mhm.
and then on the 28th in the evening is the full commission meeting where they vote to accept the comments. There's not a lot of dialogue there.
Gotcha.
More of the dialogue is on the 26th.
Okay.
Looking at page 32, noise control. And then page 33, upon submission of a land development application, applicant shall provide pre-construction noise study reviewed by township staff, township planning commission. I'll add EAC.
We're just waiting for any township boards, councils, or deemed,
Yeah, true.
just make it more generic, but
Yeah.
just include that.
And same thing for 34. It's already on page 34. It's already in there, the community environmental impact statement. Okay. So the only change I'll make is to specify what's in the community environmental impact statement under the noise. So the lighting that I don't know if there's a specific, that's more just that's going to be a zoning review.
Okay.
So they'll have to just meet it or not meet it. And that's reviewed in zoning and with our third party. But as you guys review that, that's certainly something that we can comment on when I bring the plans. It's also a little different with the optional overlay, because you guys can definitely make comments on that because it's optional and it's not as prescriptive as just a regular land development. So then that and the other one in the beginning. Excellent. Anything else related to the PERT?
Chris, I see that we're out of time already,
Yes.
and we haven't gotten to agenda item 4.
Yes.
And we have 2 people missing, so I don't know that we can really make a lot of progress on that one in terms of, what I would suggest is, one thing I did have in mind, and I don't know if staff can do this, I think it would be helpful for communication purposes if we had a list of all of the nearby townships that already have
I have a great list.
one of these fees.
Yeah.
Right, because I think that will be helpful in any communications we send out saying, this isn't unique, this isn't revolutionary, this is something a lot of other townships are already doing, and we're trying to, basically be as
Get
diligent
caught
as
up.
these other townships in trying to preserve open space. So, I think that would be helpful, and then we could maybe craft a communication around those data.
That's an excellent idea.
And also addressing comments that have been made a number of years ago and continue to be made with the meetings that you have, Chris. I mean, that's doing, it's addressing comments. People want to be open space.
It's a direct response.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the survey results, which
Yeah.
we can include in the communication that,
Yeah.
that people are generally supportive of this. And
Yeah. Did you have any questions on the survey results? I found that there was a couple things interesting in there, and so we use some of that to craft the language. for the ordinance itself. But what was interesting is I think some of it with the clean air, water, environmentally sensitive areas, that resonated very highly. And I didn't necessarily expect that so much, just as far as general open space.
I thought it was interesting that even the people who didn't want to pay a fee still valued open space preservation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, even those people were
Yeah.
highly supportive,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the plain English statement is in your packet, and then that I think is really. I hope that's actually the last page of the packet.
Mhm.
So just so everyone understands what this is, when people are going to the ballot box in November, they're going to see the question at the top of page 59.
Okay.
And they're going to have to vote either yes or no on that. There will also be, and I don't know exactly where it's positioned, if it's at the ballot itself or if it's a piece of paper that they hand to a voter going in, there will be the statement below it or something very similar to it, because the County Board of Elections, they might need to make some tweaks to it or something like that to have it fit on one page, or just minor tweaks to the language. But it explains what that question is in a little bit more layman's terms.
Mhm.
Because to have it on the ballot, you have to specify it a certain way. And so I think if it can be helpful in your crafting of the message, what we see as the administering of this funding, if this were to pass, it does three things. One, it allows us to purchase property or property rights as easements. And it's all that funding can be used for, is to actually.
Yeah, I think that's an
purchase it.
important thing
Yeah.
to emphasize, is that it's dedicated funding. It's not gonna be.
Yeah, it's not
It's
roped
not
into
gonna
the
be-
general fund,
right,
it's not looked at every budget cycle and so forth. It is its own line item, separate, its own fund, only for that.
Would that be similar, Chris, to the funding that was approved for the dam?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I know it was voter approved. We can look at that, but I actually don't know if that was, this is a requirement by state law.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's state law on any sort of voter referendum like that.
Yeah,
Because that was it was a bond. It was to approve a bond.
I believe that's, I mean, it was so long ago.
Yeah.
I don't, but I know that was just such a huge thing, and even beat funding for the library.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking to myself, okay, people were all gung ho about the dam, and apparently they're all gung ho about this. Sometimes bringing that reminder back to them, well, this, look at, you supported the dam, that's so
Even
important.
though Wildland said we should have taken the dam
That's
out.
right,
so.
that's right, that's right. That's I have a comment about that. Yeah, never mind.
That's for another conversation. So but also with that, I think just for clarity for people, is we can use that money that's raised each year to purchase properties, purchase easements. But in the case similar to the dam referendum, that was, I believe, to take out a bond
I believe.
to have a lot of money set aside to do the repairs.
Yeah.
It wasn't incremental over time. So this will start us on the path to incrementally raising funds over time. But if, say, we have a $5 million, $10 million, $15 million property that we want to buy, we can also still go the route of taking out a bond. And this funding can be used to pay off the debt of that bond. Not pay off the debt for the dam bond, not pay off the debt for the bond to construct this building, only to pay off the debt associated with purchasing property. I think that's very
my
important.
point. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my point.
Okay.
That the dam, it's only being used for
Yes,
the dam.
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did it. we've already done it once,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
that kind of
it's
thing.
all set to that.
Chris, do you know how many polling places we have in the township?
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
Probably find
that
out.
would be, if you could find that out, because I think one of the things we want to talk about is actually being present at polling sites
Mhm.
on election day and see if we can get some volunteers to do that
Mhm.
from this committee.
I'm guessing about 20.
Oh, really?
That
Yeah.
many?
That,
I'm
wow.
guessing, yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I
Yeah.
should ask my husband, because he works. the poll.
Yeah. We can definitely.
Or there might be, 5 or 6 that are
Primary.
Mhm.
primary.
That's what I was gonna say. We
Yeah.
can find out where like the
Mhm.
good sites are.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a polling place with 6
Yeah.
people, then we probably don't.
And Muhlenberg has been extremely helpful through this whole process, conducting the survey. They're going to keep the survey running for us. So if it's helpful, we can promote that and continue to collect the results of that. So if you're talking to people, we can have that as almost maybe a takeaway response to them to say, hey, here's my 5-minute speech on it, but if you have more feedback, here's our survey. We can still collect that. Muhlenberg will probably also, I mean, they have run all kinds of studies all throughout Lehigh County and nationwide. So they might give us hey, this is a really good polling precinct and this
Yeah.
is a good one to.
But we might, maybe we'll have somebody hand out a card or something. as
Yeah.
people Go into the polling place and, maybe that's part of our
Mhm.
communication.
I think it's
strategy,
great.
right?
That's a
So-
good idea.
From what I've heard through Trust for Public Land, who is the other consultant, it's that day of. That's where they emphasize the plain English statement and the language is so important because you might be able to reach some people months ahead of time, but you have 15 seconds to get someone's attention.
I think the goal at the August meeting should be for this group to make specific commitments about what we're gonna do to support this referendum. Maybe it's nothing, but
Yeah.
I think we have to, it's put up or shut up time.
Yeah.
And, it can't be, well, maybe we'll do that, maybe we'll, I think next month we have to make some decisions.
Mhm.
We're doing this, we're doing that. And we have to sign people to those things and make sure that we have commitments that we're gonna do those things.
And I was just going to add really quickly, like to take a page out of Sarah's book. I mean, I think it was very helpful. She sent out that email to everybody that talked about some of her ideas and certain things. Don't wait until the next meeting if you have ideas, if you have suggestions. I think it sounds like to your point, you want to have that commitment next meeting.
Yeah.
But if you have ideas or if you have questions, send it along. And anything you think, if you need information from me, this is great. I can look at. I'll get that list of the surrounding
Because we could end up
municipalities and
just
everything.
talking about this till election day, and then it's like, oh, I guess we're not gonna do anything, because election already happened, right? So I wanna avoid that and make sure that,
Yes.
if we're gonna support this, then we've got specific, tangible actions we're committing to support it.
And there are 8 polling stations.
But,
Only 8 polling stations.
I figured.
Oh.
Okay.
That's that's doable.
and I'm not saying we're gonna go to polling, I'm just saying that's an idea, right?
That's a
Something
great
we should talk about and decide, are we gonna do that or not? And,
Yeah, and being there at the times when the majority of the people
Yeah.
can come in. Yeah, 'cause
Yeah, for me, if there's anything that's needed, resources or things to pull together, data, or even if you think like a flyer, a mailer, something like that, if you guys can think of it in the specific application of it, let me know. And then that's where I can kind of start those internal conversations earlier, so that by August I can say, hey, we might be able to pull a budget together, or we might not be able to, or.
another thing we should talk about the next meeting is it September 27th, the community day.
Yes, so I'm committed to that. September 27th is our big community day event. That's also the night of the concerts. So I'm committed to being there for that. And a big focus that we've talked about internally was that can be a big push for that, and also just an introduction to the EAC. So
Yeah, but we might want to have something to hand out at that.
Yeah.
Right, so let's talk about that next month.
yeah, and if you want to start to think about like commitments for who else could be there, that'll also help me plan for like what I'm talking about or what else is needed there. And I mean, space wise too, we can talk to Lynn Matula and make sure we get a good prominent location and big sign and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
And that's the 27th,
Yes.
7th.
Yes. Starting at 4, and then it'll run to 8, and then the concerts will start at 7.
Do you know who the band is?
Flirting with the Mom?
Yeah,
Is that
I
it?
think that's it. I was
Yeah.
reading that today.
Yeah, they were there
Oh,
last
sure.
year.
Quick question, Chris.
Mhm.
Is, on the website, are we no longer doing the hard copy newsletter? Because the one that's online looks very much like the hard copy. I mean,
Well,
mine's
so
ads and whatnot, but,
I know for sure we're doing the e-newsletter more frequently.
okay, so it's more frequent.
Yes, I don't know.
I didn't think we had talked.
I didn't think
about
we fully phased out the hard copy,
Yeah,
but it most likely is only coming out once a year if we continue to do it. Whereas the e-newsletter, we're doing 4 times a year. It's a huge benefit to having that more frequently, because what I always run into is by the time I need to get stuff ready, it's out of date by the time it gets printed. Like, this is a perfect example. I would have had to have all the information that we wanted for the referendum probably by February, which we didn't even have approval to submit it.
right.
Will there be another e-newsletter before the election?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so we should definitely try to put something in there.
Mhm.
Well, okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you again for the EAC write-up. That was excellent. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, there will always be a spot for something from the EAC in each one of those, each quarter.
So we should commit to having something about the open space referendum newsletter.
Yeah, and we can do that sooner than later. I think we're a little late on getting the summer e-newsletter out now. So I think the fall one we'll probably want to get out sooner. So as soon as we have content, I can get it together and get it to Lynn and get it off of my plate. So that's where, again, like, if there's communications and everything, and I think nailing
You
down.
can send me that information about the other townships, and I can start drafting something.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a list. We put together a list as part of the research. The other interesting thing about that is the amounts of funding. We're definitely on the lower end as far as what people have raised for that, which I think is fair for this township, based on what we could anticipate getting from it. I mean, the 10% increase or the 0.1% increase, or whatever it is could be around $1 million a year, which is excellent.
We're still increasing people's tax bill by 10%, so it's,
Yes.
you want to be careful with that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like some of the townships, it was 0.25%, which is pretty significant, right?
It is, yeah.
That's a 25% increase.
Yeah.
In your local taxes, so.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. Proportionally, you also look at, in some municipalities, you have to do that much to get where you need to be.
Yeah.
I think that's where the average household income is. You can generate a lot of money with a smaller increase, but still the same amount of money.
Chris, I have this for you.
Oh, cool.
I'm gonna pass it down, and if you like it, I think it's appropriate, if you want to run copies for our next meeting. But
Yeah.
This was in.
Can I scan
This
that
is
in?
yours. You can take this.
Excellent, thank you.
Because it's in Civil Engineering magazine, July and August this year, urban planning.
Oh, cool.
There's a lot of good stuff in here, very similar to what we're talking about with diagrams and yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's good stuff.
I'll trade you. I have something for you, Marie.
Oh, do you have that?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wondered.
that's from Hermit's office.
Oh, okay, good.
Save the stamp. We're saving money.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I wondered, I was gonna ask you if you had something for me. That's what I was told. I said, I'm gonna be there tonight.
Okay, I guess we should close out the meeting. So,
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Courtesy of the floor, I don't think we have anything.
I just
No,
did it.
Yeah, okay. So I'll make a
Public
motion
comments?
to adjourn the meeting at 8:44. Anyone second? Second, okay, all right.
Go ahead.
All right.